Jake Morrison pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship and watched the massive space station grow larger ahead of them. Galactic Academy Station Epsilon 7 looked like a giant metal flower floating in the darkness of space. Its many arms stretched out in all directions, each one filled with lights that twinkled like stars. The 19-year-old human had never seen anything so big or beautiful in his entire life. Back on Earth, he had lived in a small town in Alaska where the biggest building was only 3 stories tall. Now he was about to become the first human student at the most important school in the galaxy. The pilot, a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms, turned to look at him. "First time off Earth, young human?" Jake nodded and smiled. "Yes, sir. I still can't believe they picked me for this program." "Well, your people are new to our community. Everyone is curious about humans." The pilot's voice had a strange musical quality to it. "Just remember, not everyone will understand your ways. Humans come from what we call a death world." Jake had heard this term before during his training. Earth was considered dangerous by galactic standards because of all the predators, diseases, and natural disasters. Most other planets in the galaxy were much safer and calmer places. The transport ship docked with a soft bump, and Jake gathered his single bag of belongings. Everything he owned fit into one small pack. He had been told that the Academy would provide everything else he needed. The docking bay was enormous and filled with creatures Jake had only seen in pictures. Tall, thin beings with crystal-like skin walked next to short, furry aliens that looked like walking teddy bears. Flying creatures with rainbow wings fluttered overhead while robots rolled between them all, carrying supplies and equipment. A voice spoke from speakers in the ceiling. "Jake Morrison, please report to Student Services Level 7. Jake found a map display and studied it carefully. The station was huge, with dozens of levels and hundreds of rooms. He took a lift that moved so smoothly he barely felt it. When the doors opened on Level 7, he stepped out into a long hallway lined with windows that showed the stars outside. At Student Services, a friendly alien with green fur and big round eyes helped him get his room assignment and class schedule. The creature spoke in a high, squeaky voice that reminded Jake of a chipmunk. "Welcome to Galactic Academy, Jake Morrison. You are in room 347 on level 12. Your first class begins tomorrow morning. Professor Zexahai teaches advanced xenobiology and predator studies." Jake thanked the alien and made his way to his room. The hallways were full of students from dozens of different species. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, while others slithered, rolled, or floated along. A few students stared at Jake as he passed, whispering to each other in languages he didn't understand. His room was small but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and window looking out into space. Jake unpacked his few belongings and tried to get some sleep, but he was too excited. Tomorrow he would attend his first alien university class. The next morning, Jake found his way to the xenobiology classroom. It was a large room with seats, arranged in a circle around a central area. About 20 students were already there, representing at least 10 different species. Jake took an empty seat and looked around. To his left sat a creature that looked like it was made of living crystal. Its body was clear with rainbow colors flowing through it like water. The being noticed Jake looking and spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "Hello. I am Kira Veltar of the Etherian people. You must be the human student we have heard about. I'm Jake Morrison. Nice to meet you. Your species fascinates us. We have heard that humans come from a very dangerous world." Before Jake could answer, the classroom door opened and Professor Zexahai entered. The professor was tall and thin with dark green scales covering his body. His head was long and narrow like a crocodile, and his yellow eyes looked at each student as he walked to the center of the room. "Welcome, students, to Advanced Predator Studies. Today we have a special demonstration that will help you understand the nature of apex predators throughout the galaxy." The professor touched a control panel, and part of the floor slid away to reveal a large cage made of glowing energy beams. Inside the cage was the most dangerous-looking creature Jake had ever seen. The Vorthak Shadowstalker was about the size of a large tiger, but built like a nightmare. Its body was covered in black, fur that seemed to absorb light. 6 legs ended in claws as long as kitchen knives. Its head had too many teeth and its eyes glowed red in the darkness of its face. Several students gasped and moved their chairs back from the cage. Kira's crystal body flickered with nervous energy. A student that looked like a giant insect made clicking sounds that Jake guessed meant fear, but Jake leaned forward in his chair studying the creature with interest. He had grown up in Alaska, where bears, wolves, and mountain lions were common. His father had taught him to hunt and fish and to understand animal behavior. This alien predator was different from Earth animals, but some things were the same, everywhere. The Shadowstalker was not trying to attack or escape. Instead, it was pacing back and forth in a pattern that Jake recognized. The creature was stressed and confused, not angry or hunting. Professor Zexhai began his lecture. The Vorthak Shadowstalker is one of the most efficient predators known to science. It can become nearly invisible, move without sound, and its claws can cut through most materials. On its homeworld of Vorthak Prime, these creatures are the undisputed apex predators. Jake raised his hand. Professor, is the creature male or female, and how long has it been in captivity? The question surprised the professor. It is male, and has been here for approximately 6 standard months. Why do you ask? The way it's moving suggests it's looking for territory markers. On Earth, male predators often pace like that when they're in an unfamiliar environment. The other students turned to stare at Jake. They seemed shocked that he was analyzing the dangerous creature instead of being afraid of it. A student that looked like a small elephant with purple skin spoke up. Are you not frightened, human? This creature could kill you in seconds. Jake shrugged. Sure, it's dangerous, but so are grizzly bears and wolverines back home. Understanding a predator is the first step to staying safe around it. Professor Zexhai looked interested now. Please explain what you mean, Mr. Morrison. Well, look at its body language. The way it holds its head, how its ears are positioned, the rhythm of its pacing. This isn't hunting behavior or aggression. The animal is anxious and trying to figure out its situation. Jake pointed to different parts of the creature as he spoke. See how it keeps returning to the same spot in the cage? That's probably where it feels safest. And notice how it's not looking at us as potential prey. It's basically ignoring us, which means it doesn't see us as an immediate threat or food source. The Shadowstalker, as if responding to Jake's words, stopped pacing and sat down in the exact spot Jake had indicated. Its red eyes looked directly at Jake for a long moment, then it laid down and put its head on its front paws. The classroom fell completely silent. Even Professor Zexhai stared in amazement. In 30 years of teaching, the professor said slowly, I have never seen a Shadowstalker relax in the presence of students. Jake smiled. Animals are pretty much the same everywhere, Professor. They just want to feel safe and understand their place in the world. Kira's crystal body was now glowing with curiosity instead of fear. Jake Morrison, would you be willing to teach us more about predator behavior? I'd be happy to, Jake replied, still watching the now calm Shadowstalker. But I think this guy could teach us just as much if we know how to listen. The bell rang to end class, but none of the students moved. They were all staring at Jake Morrison, the human from the dangerous world who had just done something impossible. The deadly predator that terrified them had somehow recognized something in this young man that made it feel safe. As the students finally began to leave, Professor Zexhai approached Jake's desk. Mr. Morrison, would you be interested in assisting with tomorrow's demonstration? I believe your insights could be very valuable to this class. Jake looked at the Shadowstalker, which was still resting peacefully in its cage, then back at the professor. I'd like that very much, sir. 3 days had passed since Jake's first class with the Shadowstalker. Word had spread quickly through the station about the human who could calm dangerous predators. Students from other classes began stopping by to watch Jake during his visits to Professor Zexhai's lab. Jake didn't mind the attention, but he found it strange. Back on Earth, understanding animals was something most people learned if they spent time in the wilderness. Here it seemed like a special skill that amazed everyone. Today's class was going to be different. Professor Zexhai had promised a more advanced demonstration using the habitat simulator. The room had been changed overnight. Where there used to be simple seats, Now there was a large glass observation deck looking down into what looked like a real forest. Jake arrived early and found Kira already there, her crystal body shimmering with excitement. "Good morning, Jake. I have been reading about Earth animals all night. Your world has so many predators living in the same areas. How do your people survive?" Jake sat down next to her. "We learned to understand them, I guess. My dad always said that most dangerous animals don't want to hurt people. They just want to be left alone or they're protecting something important to them." More students arrived, including Bronkethus, the insect-like creature who represented his hive mind species. Braun's large compound eyes fixed on Jake as he settled into his seat. "Human Jake, my collective has been discussing your methods. We find your individual decision-making under pressure most unusual. Our species always acts as one mind. Sometimes you have to trust your gut feeling," Jake replied. "When there's danger, you don't always have time to think everything through." Professor Zexai entered the classroom looking more excited than usual. His scaled hands moved quickly over a control panel, and the lights dimmed. Below them, the T habitat simulator came to life. What had been an empty space now looked exactly like a real alien forest, complete with strange purple trees and floating plants that glowed softly in the artificial sunlight. "Today, students, we will observe the shadow stalker in its natural hunting environment. The habitat simulator will create holographic prey animals, and we will witness true predatory behavior." The energy cage appeared in the center of the forest, still containing the same shadow stalker from the previous class. But something was different. The creature was pacing more quickly than before, and its red eyes kept looking up at the observation deck where the students sat. Jake frowned. The animal's body language was all wrong. Instead of the calm confidence he had seen before, the shadow stalker looked nervous and agitated. "Professor," Jake called out, "I think something's bothering the creature. It looks stressed." Professor Zexai checked his instruments. "All readings are normal, Mr. Morrison. Perhaps it simply senses the change in environment." The professor activated the next phase of the demonstration. The energy cage expanded to fill most of the forest space, giving the shadow stalker room to move around. Holographic deer-like creatures appeared among the trees, moving and grazing as if they were real. But instead of stalking the holograms, the shadow stalker crouched low and continued to pace. Its head kept turning toward the walls of its expanded cage, and Jake could see its muscles tensing with each step. "This is not normal behavior," Jake said louder this time. "Professor, I think we should stop the demonstration." "Nonsense," Professor Zexai replied, but his voice sounded less confident than before. "The containment systems are completely secure. Nothing could possibly go wrong." As if the universe wanted to prove him wrong, a warning alarm began to sound. Throughout the station, red emergency lights flashed on the walls and a voice spoke over the communication system. "Attention, all personnel. Multiple system failures detected in Science Section 7. All students and staff should evacuate non-essential areas immediately." The habitat simulator flickered like a broken television. The holographic forest disappeared for a moment, then came back, then vanished again. The energy cage around the shadow stalker began to spark and flicker with each system glitch. Students jumped to their feet, looking around nervously. Some began moving toward the exit, but Professor Zexai called for calm. "Please remain seated. The backup systems will engage momentarily. There is no danger." But Jake was already standing and moving closer to the observation window. His eyes were fixed on the shadow stalker below. The creature had stopped pacing and was now standing perfectly, still, watching the flickering energy barriers that contained it. "Professor, you need to evacuate everyone now," Jake said urgently. "That animal knows the cage is failing." Professor Zexai looked at his control panel, and his scaled face went pale. "That's impossible. The containment field shows stable readings." Another alarm sounded, this one much louder and more urgent. The station's main computer voice spoke clearly through the speakers. "Critical system failure in Science Section 7. Containment breach imminent. All personnel evacuate immediately." The energy cage around the shadow stalker flickered once more, sparked brightly, and then disappeared completely. For a moment, everyone in the observation deck stood frozen. The Shadow Stalker, now free in the large habitat space, looked up at them through the glass. Its red eyes seemed to glow brighter in the flashing emergency lights. Then chaos erupted. Kira's crystal body flashed with terror as she stumbled toward the exit. Bronkethus made rapid clicking sounds that Jake realized was probably his species' way of calling for help from the hive mind. Other students screamed and pushed toward the door, creating a dangerous crowd at the single exit. Professor Zexhai frantically worked at his controls trying to restore the containment field, but nothing happened. The Shadow Stalker began to move, prowling around the habitat space and looking for a way out. "Everyone stay calm," Jake shouted over the noise, but no one was listening. The panic was spreading faster than he could control. The Shadow Stalker found what it was looking for. Near the back of the habitat was a maintenance panel that had been damaged by the system failures. The creature's powerful claws made quick work of the weakened metal, and within seconds it had torn open a hole large enough to crawl through. "It's getting out!" someone screamed from the crowd near the door. Jake looked around quickly. The observation deck had only one exit, and 20 panicked students were trying to get through it at once. If the Shadow Stalker made it up to their level, people were going to get hurt in the stampede. But as Jake watched the creature move, he noticed something important. The Shadow Stalker wasn't trying to hunt or attack anything. It was moving the way animals moved when they were looking for a safe place to hide. Its ears were back, its body was low to the ground, and it kept looking over its shoulder as if something was chasing it. "Professor," Jake called out, "turn off all the alarms and flashing lights. The noise and lights are scaring it." "What?" Professor Zexhai looked at Jake as if he had lost his mind. "Mr. Morrison, this is not the time for animal psychology. We need to evacuate." "The creature isn't hunting," Jake insisted. "It's running scared. All this noise and chaos is making it panic, which makes it more dangerous." The Shadow Stalker had found the access tunnel that led from the habitat to the main station corridors. Jake could see it sniffing at the opening, trying to decide which way to go. "Everyone stop pushing," Jake said, moving toward the panicked crowd at the exit. "You're making more noise than the alarms." But his words were lost in the chaos. Students continued to push and shove, making clicking, chirping, and whistling sounds in their various languages. The cacophony echoed through the chamber and down into the habitat below. The Shadow Stalker made its decision. It disappeared into the access tunnel, heading toward the main sections of the station where thousands of people lived and worked. "Now, it's really going to be scared," Jake said to himself. "And scared predators are the most dangerous kind." He looked at the crowd of students still struggling to get through the door, then at Professor Zexhai, who was staring at his useless control panel, then at the tunnel where the Shadow Stalker had vanished. Jake made his own decision. Instead of joining the crowd at the exit, he headed for the emergency access ladder that led down into the habitat space. "Mr. Morrison, what are you doing?" Professor Zexhai called out. "Someone needs to find that animal before it hurts someone," Jake replied, opening the access hatch. "And I'm probably the only person on this station who has any idea how to do it safely. You cannot go down there alone. It's far too dangerous." Jake paused at the top of the ladder and looked back at his professor. "Professor, I've tracked wounded bears through blizzards and cornered mountain lions in caves. I think I can handle one scared alien cat." He started down the ladder before anyone could stop him. Behind him, he could hear Professor Zexhai trying to contact station security. But Jake knew that by the time help arrived, the Shadow Stalker would be deep in the station's maze of corridors and service tunnels. As his feet touched the floor of the habitat space, Jake looked around carefully. The artificial forest was gone, leaving only bare metal walls and the smell of ozone from the failed energy systems. In the distance, he could hear the faint sound of emergency sirens echoing through the station's corridors. Somewhere in that maze of metal and machinery, a terrified predator was looking for a place to hide. Jake moved quietly through the empty habitat space, his eyes scanning the floor for any signs of the Shadow Stalker's path. The creature had left scratches on the metal flooring where its claws had scraped for grip. The marks led straight to the access tunnel, just as Jake had expected. He knelt down at the tunnel entrance and listened carefully. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the soft sound of claws clicking against metal. The Shadow Stalker was moving deeper into the station, but it wasn't running. The steady rhythm told Jake that the creature was exploring, trying to understand its new environment. Jake pulled out his student communication device and tried to contact Professor Zexhai, but all he got was static. The system failures were affecting communications throughout the station. He was on his own. The access tunnel was barely tall enough for Jake to crawl through, but it was perfect size for the Shadow Stalker. As he moved forward, Jake noticed something interesting. The creature wasn't leaving claw marks on the tunnel walls. It was being careful not to make unnecessary noise or damage. Smart, Jake whispered to himself. You're not trying to fight your way out, you're just looking for somewhere safe. After 10 minutes of crawling, Jake reached a junction where 3 tunnels met. He stopped and listened again. The claw sounds were coming from the left tunnel, which according to the station maps in his memory led toward the residential sections. That was bad news. If the Shadow Stalker reached the areas where people lived, someone was going to panic and do something stupid. Jake had seen what happened when scared people encountered dangerous animals back on Earth. Usually both the people and the animal got hurt. He followed the left tunnel as quickly as he could while staying quiet. The sounds ahead of him were getting closer, which meant the Shadow Stalker had stopped moving. Jake hoped that was a good sign. The tunnel opened into a maintenance room filled with pipes and electrical panels. And there, curled up in the corner, behind a large water recycling unit, was the Shadow Stalker. The creature looked up when Jake emerged from the tunnel, but it didn't move to attack. Instead, it watched him with those glowing red eyes, its body tense but not aggressive. Jake could see that the animal was breathing hard, and its ears kept twitching at every sound from the station's ventilation system. Hey there, big guy, Jake said softly, keeping his voice calm and low. This isn't exactly home, is it? The Shadow Stalker's ears moved forward slightly at the sound of Jake's voice. It recognized him from the classroom, which was good. Animals remembered people who didn't threaten them. Jake sat down on the floor about 10 feet away from the creature, far enough to be safe but close enough to continue their conversation. He had learned long ago that talking to scared animals often helped them stay calm. I know you're confused, Jake continued, making sure not to look directly into the creature's eyes. Direct eye contact was threatening behavior for most predators. All those alarms and flashing lights, and now you're in this strange metal place that doesn't smell like anything you know. The Shadow Stalker shifted its position slightly but didn't get up. Jake took that as a good sign. The thing is, buddy, you're scaring a lot of people right now. And scared people do stupid things that get everyone hurt. Jake heard footsteps in the corridor outside the maintenance room. Heavy boots and the sound of equipment being moved. Station security had finally arrived. The Shadow Stalker heard them too. Its head snapped toward the door, and its muscles tensed as it prepared to run or fight. The creature let out a low growling sound that Jake felt in his chest. It's okay, Jake said quickly. They're not hunting you. They're just trying to keep everyone safe. The maintenance room door opened, and Captain Nix Prater stepped inside. The feline security chief was tall and muscular, with golden fur and sharp teeth that showed when she spoke. She carried a weapon that looked like it could stun a creature the size of the Shadow Stalker. Captain Prater stopped when she saw Jake sitting calmly near the dangerous predator. Her yellow eyes went wide with surprise. Student Morrison, what are you doing in here? Get away from that creature immediately. Captain, please don't make any sudden movements, Jake said, without taking his eyes off the Shadow Stalker. The animal is scared, not aggressive. If you threaten it, it might attack. That creature is loose on my station, Captain Prater said, but she didn't raise her weapon. It poses a danger to everyone aboard. Actually, it doesn't, Jake replied. Look at its body language, the way it's positioned, how it's breathing, where it chose to hide. This isn't predatory behavior. It's defensive behavior. The Shadow Stalker was watching both Jake and Captain Prater, but its attention was focused more on the armed security chief. Jake could see the creature calculating its options, trying to decide if it should run or fight. Captain, I need you to put your weapon down and step back slowly, Jake said. You're making it nervous. I am not going to disarm myself in the presence of a dangerous predator. You're not dealing with a dangerous predator right now, Jake explained patiently. You're dealing with a scared animal that wants to go home. There's a big difference. Captain Prater looked from Jake to the Shadowstalker and back again. As a member of the feline Faloran species, she had some predatory instincts of her own, though her people had been civilized for thousands of years. Explain to me how you know this creature is not preparing to attack. Jake pointed to different parts of the Shadowstalker's body as he spoke. See how its claws are retracted? If it was planning to fight, they would be extended. And look at its tail. It's tucked close to its body, which is defensive posture. An aggressive predator would have its tail up or lashing back and forth. The captain studied the creature more carefully. What about the growling? That's a warning, not a threat. It's saying, please leave me alone, not, I'm going to attack you. Most animals prefer to avoid fights if they can. Jake slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out an energy bar from his lunch. He broke off a small piece and tossed it gently toward the Shadowstalker, making sure it landed far enough away that the creature wouldn't feel threatened. The Shadowstalker sniffed the food but didn't eat it. Instead, it looked back at Jake with what almost seemed like curiosity. On Earth, Jake said, I grew up around brown bears, wolves, mountain lions, and dozens of other predators. My father taught me that the key to staying safe around dangerous animals is understanding what they actually want. And what does this creature want? Captain Prater asked. Same thing any scared animal wants. A safe place to rest, some food, and to be left alone until it can figure out what to do next. More security officers appeared in the doorway behind Captain Prater, but she held up a hand to keep them back. She was beginning to understand that Jake might actually know what he was talking about. Most species in the galaxy evolved from prey animals, Jake continued. They developed intelligence to avoid being eaten, and then they created technology to make their world safe. Humans are different. We evolved as hunters and predators, but we also had to live alongside other dangerous species. Jake gestured toward the Shadowstalker, which had relaxed slightly now that the conversation had been going on for several minutes without anyone making threatening moves. This gives us a different perspective. We understand predators because we are predators. We know how they think, because we think the same way in some situations. Captain Prater lowered her weapon but didn't put it away. What do you suggest we do, Mr. Morrison? First, we need to clear all the security people out of the corridor. Too many strangers will keep the creature agitated. Then we need to figure out how to get it back to its proper containment area without making it feel like it's being attacked. And how exactly do we do that? Jake smiled and looked at the Shadowstalker, which was now watching their conversation with apparent interest. We ask it nicely. He stood up slowly, making sure all his movements were smooth and non-threatening. The Shadowstalker tensed but didn't move from its corner. Hey, buddy, Jake said softly. I know this place is confusing and scary, but your real home is back in the lab where there's food and a comfortable place to sleep. What do you say we head back there? To Captain Prater's amazement, the Shadowstalker stood up and stretched like a giant cat. It looked at Jake, then at the tunnel entrance, then back at Jake again. I think it understands you, the captain whispered. Most intelligent predators are good at reading body language and tone of voice, Jake replied. They have to be, or they don't survive very long. The Shadowstalker walked slowly toward the tunnel entrance, pausing to look back at Jake as if asking him to follow. Well, I'll be damned, Captain Prater said under her breath. Jake grinned and started walking toward the tunnel. Come on, big guy, let's get you home. As they made their way back through the maintenance tunnels, Jake explained more about predator behavior to Captain Prater, who followed at a safe distance. The Shadowstalker moved calmly ahead of them, no longer the panicked creature that had escaped from the classroom. When they finally emerged back into the habitat space, Professor Zexhai and several other faculty members were waiting with a new containment unit. They all stared in shock as the Shadowstalker walked directly into the energy cage and settled down in its familiar resting spot. News of Jake's successful handling of the Shadowstalker spread through the entire station within hours. By the next morning, Jake couldn't walk down a corridor without students stopping to stare at him or ask questions. Some whispered in their native languages as he passed, while others approached him directly with curiosity in their voices. Jake was eating breakfast in the main cafeteria when Kira slid her crystalline form into the seat across from him. Her body was glowing with excited energy, shifting through different colors as she spoke. "Jake, everyone is talking about what you did yesterday. The professors are calling emergency meetings to discuss your methods. I just helped a scared animal find its way home," Jake said between bites of something that tasted like scrambled eggs but was bright blue. "It wasn't that complicated." "But it was impossible," Kira insisted. "No one has ever been able to communicate with a loose predator like that. My people have studied interspecies communication for centuries, and we have never achieved what you did in a few minutes." Bron Kethis approached their table, his insect-like legs clicking on the metal floor. The representative of the hive mind species settled his large body into a specially designed chair and focused his compound eyes on Jake. "Human Jake, my collective has analyzed the security recordings of yesterday's incident. We are confused by your decision-making process. You acted as an individual without consulting others, and made choices that seemed dangerous but proved correct. How is this possible?" Jake thought about the question while he finished his blue eggs. "I guess I just trusted my instincts. When I saw the Shadow Stalker, I could tell it was scared. Everything else followed from that." "But how did you know it was scared rather than aggressive?" Kira asked. "To us, it looked equally dangerous either way." "Experience, mostly," Jake replied. "When I was 12, I got lost in the woods during a camping trip. I spent 2 days trying to find my way back to camp, and during that time I encountered 3 different black bears. Both aliens leaned forward with interest. Stories about surviving encounters with Earth's predators fascinated them. The first bear I met was protecting her cubs. She made herself look big, made loud noises, and basically told me to get lost. So I backed away slowly and left the area. The second bear was just eating berries and didn't care about me at all. I watched it for a while from a safe distance, then moved on." "And the third bear?" Bron asked. "The third bear was injured and scared. It had gotten caught in an old hunting trap that cut its leg. When I found it, the bear was lying under a fallen tree, breathing hard and watching everything around it with panic in its eyes." Jake paused to take a drink of water before continuing. "That bear looked exactly like the Shadow Stalker did yesterday. Same body language, same kind of fear, same need to find a safe place to recover." "What did you do?" Kira whispered. "I sat, down where the bear could see me but far enough away that it didn't feel threatened. Then I talked to it in a calm voice for about an hour until it stopped being afraid of me. After that, I was able to get close enough to free its leg from the trap." "You freed a dangerous predator that was already injured and scared?" Bron's clicking sounds indicated amazement. "That seems extremely risky." "Not really," Jake said. "Once I understood what the bear needed, helping it was the safest thing for both of us. If I had left it trapped, it would have died slowly and painfully. If I had tried to force it free without gaining its trust first, it might have attacked me in fear. But by taking time to communicate first, we both got what we wanted." Professor Zexhai appeared at their table, carrying a datapad and looking more excited than Jake had ever seen him. "Mr. Morrison, I apologize for interrupting your meal, but I have a proposition for you." "What kind of proposition, Professor?" "The Academy Board has asked me to completely redesign the Predator Studies curriculum based on your demonstration yesterday. They want to include practical animal psychology and behavior reading techniques. Would you be willing to assist me in developing these new courses?" Jake looked around the cafeteria. Other students and faculty members were watching their conversation with obvious interest. Some had moved closer to listen. "I'm not sure I'm qualified to design university courses, Professor. I'm just a first-year student. But you have practical experience that none of our other faculty possess," Professor Zexhai insisted. "You understand predator psychology in ways that our traditional academic approaches have never achieved." Kira's crystal body flickered with an idea. "Jake, what if you started with something smaller? You could teach a study group for students who want to learn about animal behavior." "That might work," Jake said slowly. "I could share some of the things my father taught me, and maybe we could practice with some of the safer specimens in the lab." "Excellent," Professor Zexhai said, making notes on his datapad. I will arrange for you to have access to the Behavioral Study Lab 3 evenings per week. You can work with any students who are interested in learning your methods. Word of Jake's study group spread even faster than news of the Shadowstalker incident. By the time of the first meeting that evening, 30 students from 12 different species had gathered in the Behavioral Study Lab. Jake looked around the room nervously. He had never taught anything before, and he wasn't sure how to explain concepts that seemed obvious to him. Hi everyone, he began awkwardly. I guess we're here to talk about understanding animal behavior. A student who looked like a walking tree raised one of its branch-like arms. Jake Morrison, please explain how you knew the Shadowstalker would not attack you. Well, it's really about reading body language, Jake replied, feeling more confident as he got into the subject. Every animal, whether it's from Earth or somewhere else, uses its body to communicate. You just have to know what to look for. He gestured toward the containment area where several smaller predators were housed in comfortable habitats. Look at that crystalline wolf over there. See how it's sitting? Its ears are forward, its tail is relaxed, and it's looking around with curiosity rather than suspicion. That tells us it feels safe and comfortable. The students all turned to observe the wolf-like creature Jake had pointed out. Sure enough, the animal was displaying exactly the behaviors he had described. Now look at the Venusian sand cat in the next habitat, Jake continued. Notice how different its posture is. Ears back, body low to the ground, tail twitching. That cat is nervous about something. Jake walked over to the sand cat's habitat and looked around carefully. There's your problem, he said, pointing to a maintenance robot that was cleaning the floor nearby. The noise and movement of that robot is making the cat uncomfortable. If we turn off the robot, the cat should relax within a few minutes. Signaled to the lab technician, who deactivated the cleaning robot. Almost immediately, the sand cat's ears came forward and its body posture changed to a more relaxed position. The students made various sounds of amazement in their different languages. How did you know the robot was the problem? Asked a student, who resembled a large butterfly with rainbow wings. Process of elimination, Jake explained. The cat was displaying stress behaviors, so something in its environment was bothering it. I looked for anything that was new or different from when the cat was calm before. Over the next 2 hours, Jake worked with the students to identify behavioral patterns in various creatures. He taught them about threat displays versus fear responses, how to recognize when an animal was curious versus when it was hunting, and the importance of understanding an animal's natural needs. Kira proved to be an excellent student, using her species' natural electromagnetic sensitivity to detect emotional changes in the animals that others couldn't see. Braun brought the collective intelligence of his hive mind to analyze patterns and make connections between different species' behaviors. As the session was ending, Captain Nix Prater entered the lab. The security chief had been observing from the corridor, and Jake could see approval in her feline features. Mr. Morrison, I've been watching your teaching methods. I would like to discuss having you consult on security protocols for handling dangerous species throughout the station. I'd be happy to help, Captain. We have 17 different predatory species in containment across various research facilities. Some of them have been problematic, showing stress behaviors and occasionally becoming aggressive with handlers. Your approach might help us reduce these incidents. Jake nodded. Most aggressive behavior in captive animals comes from fear, frustration, or unmet needs. If we can identify what each species requires to feel secure, we can probably eliminate most of the problems. Captain Prater smiled, showing her sharp teeth. That's exactly what I was hoping you would say. As the students began to leave, several approached Jake with questions about specific animals or situations they had encountered. A young Aquarian asked about dealing with the giant sea creatures on his homeworld. A Rockborn student wanted to know about territorial behavior in herd animals. Jake answered each question as best he could, but he also encouraged the students to observe and think for themselves. The most important thing, he told them, is to remember that every animal is an individual. Even if you know all about a species' general behavior, each creature will have its own personality and needs. Jake was in the middle of his third study group session when the emergency alarms began screaming throughout the station. This time, the sound was different from the system failures they had experienced before. This was the deep, urgent tone. That meant immediate danger to everyone aboard. The lights in the behavioral study lab switched to emergency red, and Captain Prater's voice echoed through the communication system. All students and non-essential personnel report to emergency shelters immediately. We have a code black situation. This is not a drill. Code black meant an external threat to the station itself. Jake had learned the emergency codes during his orientation, but he had never expected to hear one for real. Kira's crystal body flickered with fear. Code black means something is attacking the station from outside. Braun's compound eyes turned toward the ceiling as his hive mind collective processed information from across the station. My people report massive impacts on the outer hull. Something very large is striking the station repeatedly. The 30 students in Jake's study group looked to him for guidance, even though he was just as confused as they were. Before he could say anything, Professor HFY burst into the lab. "Everyone to the shelters now," the professor ordered, his scaled skin pale with fear. "We are under attack by something we have never encountered before." As the students hurried toward the exit, Jake caught Professor HFY's arm. "Professor, what exactly is attacking us?" "The sensors show a creature over 200 meters long," Professor HFY replied, his voice shaking. "It appeared from deep space and began striking the station immediately. Our weapons have no effect on it." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. 200 meters was longer than most Earth whales. Whatever was out there was enormous. The students made their way through corridors filled with panicking people of dozens of species. Everyone was heading for the emergency shelters deep inside the station, where the hull was thickest and safest. But as they walked, Jake noticed something strange. The impacts on the station weren't random. They came in a steady pattern, almost like the creature was knocking on the station's hull. "Professor," Jake called out over the noise of the crowd, "are the impacts getting stronger or staying the same?" Professor HFY checked his datapad. "They appear to be consistent in force. Why do you ask?" Jake stopped walking, causing several students behind him to bump into each other. "If something wanted to destroy the station, wouldn't it hit us as hard as possible? Why would it use the same amount of force each time?" "I don't understand what you're suggesting, Mr. Morrison. What if it's not trying to attack us? What if it's trying to communicate?" Professor HFY stared at Jake as if he had lost his mind. "Mr. Morrison, this is hardly the time for your animal psychology theories." But Kira was listening carefully. Her electromagnetic senses were picking up patterns that others couldn't detect. "Jake, I think you might be right. The impacts are creating vibrations through the station's hull, and those vibrations have a rhythm to them." Jake closed his eyes and listened to the sounds echoing through the corridors. The impacts came in groups of 3, followed by a pause, then 3 more impacts. It was definitely a pattern. "I need to see what's happening outside," Jake said. "Absolutely not," Professor HFY replied. "You will go to the shelters with everyone else." But Jake was already moving, pushing through the crowd toward the observation decks instead of following everyone else to safety. Kira and Braun followed him, along with several other students from his study group. They reached Observation Deck 7 just as another series of impacts shook the station. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Jake could see the creature that was causing all the panic. The Void Leviathan was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Jake had ever seen. Its body was sleek and graceful, covered in scales that shifted, color like oil on water. Massive fins spread out from its sides, and its head was elongated like that of a whale, but with intelligent eyes that glowed with soft blue light. "It's magnificent," Kira whispered, her crystal body glowing with awe instead of fear. Jake watched the creature's movements carefully. It wasn't thrashing around wildly or trying to tear the station apart. Instead, it was using its head to tap specific sections of the hull in that same 3-tap pattern. "Look at where it's hitting," Jake said, pointing to the areas the creature was targeting. "Those are all near the specimen storage areas." "You think it knows about the animals we keep here?" Braun asked. "I think it can sense them," Jake replied. "Look at its behavior. It's not attacking randomly. It's investigating specific areas where it detects other creatures." Captain Prater's voice came over the communication system again. Attention all personnel. We are preparing to use the station's emergency defense systems. All shelters will be sealed in 60 seconds. Jake realized what that meant. The defense systems would fire weapons at the creature, and if his theory was right, attacking it would turn a curious investigation into a real fight. I have to stop them, Jake said, running toward the communication panel on the observation deck. He activated the emergency channel. Captain Prater, this is Jake Morrison. Please don't fire on the creature. Mr. Morrison, you should be in a shelter. This channel is for emergency personnel only. Captain, please listen to me. That creature isn't attacking us. It's trying to communicate. There was a pause before Captain Prater responded. Explain quickly. The impacts are coming in a pattern. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause. And it's only hitting areas near where we keep other animals. I think it's asking about the creatures it can sense inside the station. That's impossible. Void leviathans are space predators. They're not intelligent. How do we know that? Jake asked. Has anyone ever tried to communicate with one before? Or do we just assume they're mindless because they're big and scary? Another series of impacts shook the station, and Jake could see the creature's glowing eyes looking directly at the observation deck where they stood. Captain, it can see us, Jake said urgently. It knows there are intelligent beings here. If it wanted to destroy the station, it would have done it already. Something this size could tear us apart in minutes. What are you suggesting, Mr. Morrison? Jake took a deep breath. Let me try to communicate with it. Absolutely not. You are not going outside this station. Not outside, Jake said. But I can try to signal to it from here. If I'm right about it trying to communicate, it might respond to deliberate signals from us. There was a long pause. Jake could hear Captain Prater discussing something with other security officers over the open channel. Finally, she spoke again. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Morrison. If your communication attempt fails, or if the creature becomes more aggressive, we will use the defense systems. Jake looked around the observation deck and found the emergency signal lights that could be controlled manually. He began flashing them in the same 3-pulse pattern the creature had been using with its impacts. The void. Leviathan stopped tapping the station's hull and turned its massive head toward the observation deck, its glowing eyes fixed on the flashing lights. Jake waited, then flashed the pattern again. This time, the creature responded by creating its own light display. Bioluminescent patches along its body lit up in the same 3-pulse pattern. It's working, Kira said excitedly. It's copying your signal. Jake tried a different pattern. 4 flashes, pause, 4 flashes. The creature responded, with 4 glowing pulses from its body. We're actually talking to it, Braun said, his hive mind collective buzzing with amazement. Now came the hard part. Jake needed to communicate something more complex. He thought about what the creature might want to know about the specimens on the station. Using the signal lights, Jake created a pattern that started with 3 pulses to get the creature's attention, then a series of different patterns representing different types of animals. Short pulses for small creatures, long pulses for large ones, rapid sequences for many animals, slow sequences for few animals. The void. Leviathan watched intently, its bioluminescent patches responding to each pattern. But then it did something unexpected. It moved away from the station and began creating complex light displays across its entire body. What is it doing? Professor Zexhai asked. He had found them on the observation deck and was watching the light show with amazement. I think it's telling us about itself, Jake said. Look at the patterns. They're more complex than anything I showed it. The creature's display went on for several minutes, with lights flowing across its body in waves and spirals. When it finished, it moved closer to the station again and began the simple 3-pulse pattern. Jake understood. The creature had introduced itself and was now asking for an introduction in return. He used the signal lights to create the most complex pattern he could manage, trying to represent the diversity of species on the station and the fact that they were all living together peacefully. The void leviathan's response was immediate. Its entire body lit up with what could only be described as joy. The lights danced and swirled in patterns that were beautiful beyond description. Then, As suddenly as it had appeared, the creature began to move away from the station. But before it disappeared into the darkness of space, it created one final light display. The message was clear even without words. Farewell.